Good afternoon. You're watching Businessworld Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Monday. All right, for the first time in close to 2 years, the local bourse returns to full trading hours, but not without glitches. Trading was paused at 2:08 p.m. due to technical issues, but again, trading resumed later on in the day. You have the index closing just 15 minutes ago, up by 1.1%, ending at 7,130, marking a third day in the green here for the benchmark. This, as the health department says, that the Philippines is now at minimal risk for COVID-19 with two-week growth rate at negative 57%. This amid the looming threat of the Omicron variant, which the Octa Research Group says is twice as transmissible as the Delta variant. Now, earlier in the program, we had Ed Francisco, the president of BDO Capital and Investment Corporation. He said that with hopes that the Omicron variant won't be as severe, especially as to how it might impact the Philippines. He says he hopes that there won't be a repricing anymore in the index. He doesn't see any further downside here to the PSEI as we approach the Christmas season. Now, looking at our leaders and laggards here, you'd see our advancers beating decliners today with PLDT outperforming up 4.5%. It's biggest gain yet since September this year. You also have Aboitiz, BPI, and Converge, as well as ICTSI, all ending the day higher by 3%. For the port operator ICTSI, this comes as JP Morgan reinstates ICTSI as overweight with a price target of 244 apiece. ASEN, however, or AC Energy is the day's biggest loser, closing lower by 2.9%, marking its second day in the red. But this time, let's focus on one Villar stock here. I'm talking about Vista Land. This is the property tycoon Manny Villar Bear that is working on a 2,000-hectare central business district in the southern part of Metro Manila. It's going to be the biggest yet for the developer. We're talking about a development here or property that's going to touch on 11 cities from Parañaque to Las Piñas, Muntinlupa, San Pablo in Laguna, also Bacoor, Imus, and Dasmariñas in Cavite. Now, Francisco, again, earlier in the show said Villar has the infrastructure. They own various brands, and it's going to be very easy for the developer to actually populate the property. Looking at Vista so far, it ended the session up 1.6%, ended the day at 3 pesos and 68 centavos a piece. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The PSC has approved the IPO of residential property developer House Talk. It's going to be the first company to list on the local bourse in 2022. The offer period for House Stock is slated to run from January 3 to 7, while tentative listing on the Small, Medium, and Emerging or SME board is set for January 17. Now, according to its preliminary prospectus released in August, the company plans to list under the ticker symbol HTI. The company seeks to raise up to 750 million pesos by offering 500 million shares at 1 peso and 50 centavos apiece. It will send the final offer price on December 27 after its book building process. PSC President and CEO Ramon Monzon says they are expecting more SMEs to list in the local bourse as they have relaxed listing rules and beefed up support for potential applicants. Now, local retailers remain optimistic about strong holiday sales despite the threat of the Omicron variant. Stephen Kua, president of the Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association, says retailers are still expecting some revenge spending during the holiday season. Kua admits that revenge buying will not make up for losses during the lockdowns, but he says it will partially make up for lost sales. He also noted that retailers are anticipating an increase in spending as the national elections draw near. Now, to prevent another lockdown, KUA advises retailers to enforce safety protocols, avoid overstocking to reduce carrying costs, stock up on products, and instill discipline and personnel. And the health department confirms that as of Sunday, there's still no case of the Omicron variant in the country. The DOH is still awaiting genome sequencing results of more than 500 samples submitted as of December 5. 42% or 226 of these are from South Africa, while 42 are from other countries that have recorded Omicron cases. The agency notes that the Delta variant remains to be the dominant COVID-19 strain in the Philippines. Meanwhile, the DOH says the entire country is now under minimal risk classification for COVID 19. This as cases plunge lower than the lowest cases that followed the peaks recorded in August last year and in April 2021. While cases drop, there's still the looming threat of the Omicron variant, which experts fear is twice more transmissible than the now dominant Delta variant. How might this affect the country's growth prospects? Time to pick the brains of Vic Abola, the Executive Director of the Strategic Business Economics Program of the University of Asia and the Pacific. Professor Vic, thank you for joining us.
Hi. Good afternoon, Jess. My pleasure.
All right. Good afternoon, sir. Of course, you guys over at UANP together with First Metro projected a return to pre-pandemic growth by the fourth quarter of next year. Do you see the possible entry of the Omicron variant derailing that prospect?
I'm not quite worried about that because the reports that I read directly from South Africa was that this head of the medical association there says that they were the first to report the Omicron variant, and yet when it was picked up by the British press, it was hyped as something very very big. And actually, in their case, they had not found there were no deaths reported and minimal hospitalizations. Um, and the WHO confirms that there have been no reported deaths so far. So it's as what happens in the uh, spread of or mutants of this virus, it becomes weaker, more contagious, but weaker, less lethal. No, so I'm not worried so much about that situation as we are seeing also here, which is the Delta variant was the more deadly and quite contagious, and that we saw really peaks in our huge peaks in our cases and deaths. What as the OH has said, and I believe so, because for example, one facility in a medical city in Santa Rosa, which had a ICU COVID for COVID purposes only, as late as November, they had zero occupancy. So it seems that I think we're quite over the hump.
Mhm.
I'm not. Although of course they need to study what this variant really means, but so far the results that have come from the quite reliable sources have said that they are not that not that lethal.
Okay. You mentioned over the hump, so does that mean that your earlier projection still stands? We're going to return to pre-pandemic growth by the fourth quarter of next year.
Yes, that's my basic projection. I don't say that there are possible risks. There is a possible risk that it may not be reached because if the government overspends, in the first half,
Mhm.
there might be not much money left to continue the momentum in the second
Mhm.
semester.
Mhm.
But I, it's not that's not a likely scenario I'm projecting. That's why I still stick to my original projection that by the fourth quarter you would hit already pre-pandemic levels.
Mhm. Now, of course, much of our growth also, especially for the last quarter of the year, will be dependent on holiday spending here. How different are things going to be this year compared to last year, the first pandemic year? Are we seeing levels returning to how it was back in 2019?
By 2022, yes. This year is not. I don't think it's gonna be. It's not gonna be close because really there's still a lot of unemployment and a lot of businesses really have closed down. So and people are a little bit more cautious about spending. I would say that the ones who will be spending more will be upper middle class and higher, no? So
Mhm.
where who have the means to do that. But the lower middle class to the poor, which will be more than half of the country, will be a little bit more careful about their spending because they're not so sure. And unless, of course, before Christmas, you already have a lot of this election spending money getting to that level. But usually it doesn't get to that level until very close to election time. It goes
Mhm.
to leaders, but not to the grassroots.
Okay, speaking of election spending, I mean, that of course is expected to still provide some necessary push there for the economy, but do you see it heating up as you thought it should be?
Yeah, it's going to be, as a matter of fact, I think that we will see very much accelerated pace in the last 2 months of the year, as well as in the first and second quarter of next year,
Mhm.
because well, the administration has been boosting its cash position. They already have the up to at the end of October. They had, apart from what they had raised last year, they had an excess around 700 billion excess or 800 billion excess last year. By the end of October, they had raised their cash position by 700 billion. So yeah, 1.5 million they can spend in 6 months or 5 months. So I think that they're in very good position to do the spending.
Mhm. Now, from there, let's discuss about inflation that's expected to come out tomorrow. Your forecast is at 3.8%. That's lower
Yes.
than the median estimate of 4%. Why the lower projection here?
Well, because yeah, we remember we have two main drivers of in local inflation, which are food and fuel, right? And according to the reports I read, that crude oil prices in November were down by almost 3%. Um, and food prices, I expect it to be slightly up, but that's not going to negate the flat to lower fuel prices.
Mhm.
Uh, and the thing is that we also are counting on a very high base in November, December, and January, where the average month-on-month gain of the CPI was around 1%. That's huge, no? Because usually zero point 0.3, zero point 0.2 would be the norm.
Mhm. Now, lastly, speaking of inflation, you mentioned this earlier, but are we really over the hump here when it comes to high oil prices or pump prices? I mean, we are expecting another big time rollback tomorrow. So, is this going to be a trend from here on?
Yeah, if you look at the futures market for crude oil, they're all backwardation. So, I mean, the futures prices are lower than spot prices, um, even for next month. No? That means that the expectation is that there will be more supply in the market. Um, as OPEC itself has said that they're open to pumping more, and they're going to do that because they're afraid that the U.S. will again take market share away from them. But the U.S. will produce because that that is a must for them at this point in time. No? I mean, even Biden cannot stop the anxiety in the U.S. among U.S. consumers that fuel prices are simply so high in the U.S. right now. So I think that the supply response is going to be quite robust, enough to drive not necessarily very sharply down, but the trend will really be going down, as is forecast also by the energy by the Department of Energy of the United States.
Okay, that of course is the hope as we end the year or as the holiday season nears, that pump prices will continue to have at least a downward trend when it comes to prices. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Vic Abola, Executive Director of the Strategic Business Economics Program of the University of Asia and the
You're
Pacific.
welcome,
Thank you, sir.
Jess.
Stay safe.
Anytime.
And those are the biggest stories this trading day, December 6, 2021. Catch Business World live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jesse De Los Santos and we are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.